All right, welcome everybody. Today we are going to be installing the latest versions of Docker and Docker Compose on a Ubuntu 20.04 LTS server edition. I have it installed on a Raspberry Pi. You can have it installed on whatever hardware you want. We're going to go through the blog that I have on my site at sharek.dev, which I'll link below. That y'all can click on and follow along as we do this. Now, if you roll into the blog, you'll see that there's also instructions for macOS, Windows, and WSL2. I'm not going to make a video for those because largely it's just Docker Desktop being installed, which is just a visual application, very easy. But there's enough interest on WSL2 and setting it up to sync with your IDE or working with Docker Desktop, let me know by commenting below and we'll work on creating a video for that as well. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. So first we're going to just install Docker on Ubuntu. Following these steps, you'll see that everything on the blog is copyable. So you just click here and we are going to swap over to the IDE and we'll go from there. All right. So fresh install of Ubuntu, you'll see here that there's no Docker or anything installed. And we see here that we can do this command. I'm going to get to it, but there's a few steps before I would recommend we start with this, right? So the first step is just to delete any potential installs you had before of Docker. I'm just going to make this a little bit larger for y'all. All right, good. So here you'll see at the bottom, it says unable to locate package. That's okay. It just means that it was never installed in the first place. Let's get us back to the top. Now coming back here, we're going to run these two commands, sudo apt-get update and then apt-get install a few packages that we're going to need to be able to pull down all of our Docker dependencies as well. I'm running this on a Raspberry Pi, so it's going to be pretty slow. It may be much quicker for you. Now you see here after the first step ran, it automatically went and started running the second sudo command. That's just a nicety of the operating system itself. Here it's going to ask you, do you want to allow this to run this operation to install the packages that we defined? We're just going to go and hit Y there and hit enter, and it will roll through and install those for us as well. While it's grabbing those packages, let's head back to the blog to see what the next step is. So here we're going to install Docker's official GPG key. Why is this important? I'll link to this Stack Exchange post below, but in the end, it's just security. And that's really it, right? If you want to know more in depth, feel free to come to the linked site below. So we've grabbed the GPG key here and we'll wait for the rest of the steps to finish and we'll add it to our box. All right, now that that's done, now we're going to set up the stable repository. There's also a test and a nightly. I don't really recommend those unless you know what you're doing and you want to work with some of those bleeding edge features. It's not something that we're covering in this guide, however. Paste that in. All right, we've added this, and this echo command, right, it just prints something out, but then we're going to use this pipe and we're going to stick it into the /dev/null file. So you'll see that it will exist there if you do navigate to that area. All right, so that's all there is for setup. We can actually start installing the Docker components now. So first we're going to run this apt-get update, and then we're going to install Docker Community Edition, the CLI, and then Containerd, which is the basically the software that Docker is built on top of. All right, so some of you may have noticed that when we ran the apt-get install for Docker CE, CLI, and containerd.io, you're going to get an error. And that's because as of the recording of this video, I'm using 20.04.3, and Docker only has released support for up to 20.04.2. And this is the exact area you're going to see if you are using a version that's unsupported. Not a big deal if you're using Ubuntu. What we're going to do is just force it to install the latest package that it has for Ubuntu. So to do that, it's just going to be a sudo apt install -y docker.io. This isn't on the guide, but I will update it after this video. And this is going to take a little bit to run. It's going to be about 130, 140 megabytes, but then it will let us continue on with the rest of the guide. All right, so either you were able to run the specific sudo command that we just talked about, and now you have Docker installed, or you are able to run what's in the guide. Either or should get you to the right spot. So the next thing we're going to want to do is confirm that Docker is installed. And you can do that just by typing in docker-v, that's version. And we'll see here that we have 20.10.7. And like I said, I'm on Ubuntu 20.04.3, but you'll see this is the build for .2. And that's just what we had to do because the .3 build does not exist yet. All right, awesome. So you're like, hey, this is great, but I want to actually run my first container. Not a problem. There is a hello world Docker image that's been created by the Docker team that you can go ahead and run, and you'll be able to see the output of it. So all you have to do is come into here and just paste docker sudo docker run hello world. Unable to find the image locally because it hasn't been on your computer before, or if it was, you deleted it. So it's going to go pull it from Docker Hub, and then it's going to run it for us. So let's give that a second here. All right, awesome. So now we see this hello from Docker. It shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. That's just a misnomer, right? If they said, hey, it is working correctly and something's wrong, you wouldn't really think to troubleshoot it. So now we can go ahead and type in a docker ps, but you'll see this got permission denied while trying to connect to the daemon. If you noticed before when we ran the hello world image, we had to use the sudo command, which gives us root permissions. This is really frustrating if you have to do it every single time. So coming back to the blog, you'll see that there is this little command here that will let us, it will basically add our current user as a admin user within the Docker user group. So we're just going to paste that in. And now if I run docker ps, still getting permission denied. And that's because the settings have not been basically filtered through the whole system. So you can either log out and log back in, which is what I'm going to do here. Or you can source that user group / new permissions as well. So here I'm going to just quickly exit. And I'm going to log right back in. And now if I run docker ps, you'll see that's going to show all those Docker commands. ps-a means show all my containers, even the ones that are stopped, which is the hello world one, because all that container does is spin up, print out that message, and then it's going to shut back down as soon as that command is done running. So Docker is really versatile in that you can use it for running images that are up forever, or even for running things that are on a cron or are systematically going up and down. Now that we have Docker installed, we can go to the second part of this, which is installing Docker Compose. Docker Compose lets you run multiple containers at the same time through one YAML file or one Docker file. The benefit of this is you can have applications run that are dependent on each other. So you can first make sure your database is running. If that's running, then start your application that's connected to it. Make sure your API is running before your UI is launched, and so on and so forth. It also helps you create isolated LAN groups. So if you only want these images to communicate with each other, it'll put them on the same network, and you can isolate that from the rest of the Docker world as well. And it really is a shortcut for networking, because if I just put up a bunch of containers with this Docker run like you saw before, they can communicate with each other, but it's a little bit more cumbersome, as opposed to here, they'll all be within that same VLAN. So coming back to the guide, First, we're going to have to install the latest stable release of Docker Compose. When I was creating this guide, it was 1.29.2. If you're not sure, you can always click on this Compose repository release page. So version 2.1.1 is a pre-release. Once again, I don't recommend installing those. But in our case, we have version 2.1.0. There are breaking changes in 2 versus version 1. So just be aware that if you're using some older Compose scripts, you may have some trouble. But either ways, this is the command we want to run, but first we want to modify it, right? Now we don't want to actually install version 1.29. I want to install the latest one, which was version 2.1.0, like we were looking at before. So I'm going to just manually type this in here real quick. Sudo curl -l docker compose. And I'm copying this because it's pretty lengthy here. And we're just going to paste that right in. And that's really it. So unlike Docker Engine, where it's going to install a bunch of scripts, this is really all there is to it. It's just a simple add-on. The next thing we need to do, coming back to the blog, is actually make this binary executable. So we'll see that the chmod command is here. We're basically going to add the execute bit on the Docker Compose file itself. So coming back here. And that's really it. You now have Docker and Docker Compose installed on your application. So there you have it. You've now installed Docker and Docker Compose on your Ubuntu installation. You can use this across a majority of the Linux distros, but there are specific steps that may be taken depending on the OS you're using. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's a simple one, but it's the first one. If you need anything, please feel free to comment. If you liked it, like and subscribe. Absolutely. There will be more content like this coming out. The next thing we're going to do is actually set up a micro-K cluster across a bunch of Raspberry Pis locally. So that'll be a fun project as well. Once again, check out the blog at sharek.dev and looking forward to creating more content for y'all. Peace.